There is a sound that only exists in the grooves of certain records. A specific kind of ache. A warmth that technology has spent 60 years trying to replicate and never quite has. It lives in the breath between notes, in a vocal run that starts as music and ends as prayer. You know it when you hear it, because it does something to you that you cannot explain, only feel. That sound came from specific people, irreplaceable people. Artists who were not just talented, they were channeling something. A truth so raw that the only vessel capable of holding it was a human voice trained by decades of church, heartbreak, and hard living. And many of them are gone, not from old age, not from illness, from cocaine.
Y'all can feel it.
The same era that produced the greatest run of soul and R&B music ever recorded was also an era quietly devastated by one of the most seductive and destructive substances ever introduced into the entertainment industry. And the artists who paid the ultimate price were not cautionary tales. They were architects of American music. They were parents. They were visionaries. They were people who deserved to grow old. In this documentary, we are going to count down 10 of them. 10 R&B and soul legends whose lives and whose futures were taken by cocaine. Some of these names you will know instantly. Others may surprise you. A few will break your heart all over again. And at least one is going to stay with you long after this video ends. Stay with us. Every entry matters. And the closer we get to number 1, the harder this becomes. 10. Phyllis Hyman. We begin at number 10, and we begin with a voice that, if you have ever truly heard it, you do not forget. Phyllis Hyman. 6 feet tall, impeccably dressed, a presence that filled a room before she sang a single note. Phyllis Hyman was one of the most commanding vocalists the Philadelphia soul scene ever produced. And Philadelphia produced legends. She came up in the 1970s, cutting her teeth in clubs and lounges, before landing on Arista Records and releasing a string of albums that showcased a voice of almost impossible range and emotional depth. Her 1981 duet with Norman Connors, You Are My Starship, had already made her a fixture on late-night radio. But it was her work through the 80s and into the 90s that cemented her as an artist of genuine, lasting consequence. Living All Alone, Old Friend, Don't Want to Change the World. Songs that were not just records, they were confessions. The kind of music you play at 3 in the morning when you are telling the truth to yourself. And the truth Phyllis was living was complicated. Behind the immaculate stage presence was a woman battling depression, battling the industry, and battling a cocaine habit that had woven itself into the fabric of her daily life. The entertainment business of the 1970s and 80s was awash in cocaine. It was social currency, a confidence engine, a way to survive the grinding demands of touring and recording and performing. For Phyllis, like so many artists of her era, it started as something manageable and became something else entirely. On June 30th, 1995, just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Ambassador Theater in New York, Phyllis Hyman was found dead in her apartment. She was 45 years old. The cause of death, an overdose of pentobarbital and secobarbital. But the cocaine, the depression, the years of a battle that never stopped, they were all part of the same long, painful story. She left behind a note. It read, in part, I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you. The album she had been recording, Forever With You, was released posthumously. It went gold. Phyllis Hyman deserved to hear that. She deserved decades more. That is number 10. And if this is already sitting heavy, it should, because we have 9 more to go, and this is one of the lighter ones. 9. Bobby Womack. Number 9. And here is where we need to talk about something the clean version of music history tends to skip. Bobby Womack was not just an R&B legend. He was a foundational stone of American music, a guitarist's guitarist, a writer's writer, a voice so soaked in gospel and grief and lived experience that listening to him felt less like entertainment and more like testimony. He started singing with his brothers in the Womack Brothers' Rolling Stones, which became one of their earliest hits. But looking for a love, that's the way I feel about Cha, were windows into a soul that had seen too much and was still somehow singing. And then cocaine entered the picture. Or rather, cocaine had always been in the picture. The music industry of the late 60s and through the 70s ran on it. But for Bobby, the habit accelerated through the 80s in the way it did for me. His 2012 A Resurrection. Bobby Womack died on June 27, 2014. He was 70 years old. The official causes listed included Alzheimer's disease and pneumonia, but the decades of coke hear it. 9 down. And already we are looking at 2 artists whose gifts were shaped and ultimately shortened by the same industry their prime. Quick note, if these stories are hitting different, you are not subscribed yet. You are watching Soul Lens and we have 8 more stories to go. And trust me, they only get wilder from here. 8. Hillel Slovak. Now, some of you are going to see this name and ask whether Hillel Slovak belongs on a list of R&B and Soul legends. And the answer is, listen to what he was building before you decide. Los Angeles. He was one of 4 young men who fused punk energy with deep funk roots and proto-soul influences into something that had never quite existed before. The early Chili Peppers were not a rock band that dipped into funk. They were a funk band that happened to have the volume of rock. Slovak's guitar work, raw, rhythmically alive, deeply influenced by Sly Stone, James Brown, and the entire lineage of Black American music he had grown up revering, was central to that identity. He was 26 years old when he died. On June 26, 1988, Hillel Slovak died of a heroin overdose, but cocaine was woven through his substance. Use history in the same way it was for most of his circle during those years. The Los Angeles music scene of the mid-80s was a carnival of access and excess. And Slovak, brilliant, sensitive, not yet equipped with the tools to survive what the industry threw at young artists, was consumed by it. His death shattered the band. Drummer Jack Irons left, unable to recover from the grief. Anthony Kiedis and Flea, both deep in their own battles with addiction, had to decide whether the music was worth continuing at all. They decided it was. They got clean. They made some of the most significant music of the next 3 decades. And for 30 years, they have carried Hillel Slovak with them in every note they play. His legacy is built into the foundation of one of the best-selling bands in history. Imagine what he might have built himself. 7. Don Covey. Number 7 brings us back to the heart of classic soul, and to a name that, if you have not heard it, you have most certainly heard his fingerprints, Don Covey. Born in Orangeburg, South Carolina, raised in Washington, D.C., Don Covey was what the music industry used to call a utility player, and meant it as the highest compliment. He could sing, he could write, he could perform, he could adapt. And he did all of it across a career that 4 decades and touched virtually every corner of Black American music. You know his songs even if you do not know his name. Have mercy on me. Mercy Mercy was covered by the Rolling Stones in 1965. Chain of Fools, one of Aretha Franklin's signature recordings, was a Don Covey composition. Seesaw, Suki Suki. His catalog was the kind that other legends built their careers on. His own recordings had a rawness, a preacher's urgency grafted onto a street, hustler's rhythm, that influenced artists from Mick Jagger to Otis Redding. Hey, hey, now, what? Otis Redding called Covey one of his primary inspirations. That alone tells you what you need to know. The cocaine found him in the 1970s, during the peak of its saturation through the music industry. By the 80s, his recording output had slowed dramatically. By the 90s, a stroke had left him partially paralyzed and significantly diminished from the electric performer he had been. Don Covey died on January 13, 2015, at the age of 76. The stroke and subsequent health complications were the listed cause of death. But the decades of cocaine use, well documented in his own accounts and in the accounts of those who knew him, had laid the groundwork for a body that could no longer sustain what his spirit still demanded of it.
Mercy on me.
He should have been celebrated more while he lived. The songs he wrote will outlast all of us. 6 entries left, and the weight is building. Hold on, because number 6 is the one people always argue about, and we are going to give it the full treatment it deserves.
Have mercy.
6. Teddy Pendergrass. Entry 6. And we need to pause here because this one is layered. Teddy Pendergrass. If you were alive in the 1970s, Teddy Pendergrass was not simply a singer. He was an event. He was the reason people bought tickets, pressed clothes, and made plans. The man who replaced Harold Melvin as the voice of the Blue Notes before launching a solo career that immediately became one of the most commercially successful in soul music history. 5 consecutive platinum albums. A live show that became culturally mythologized. Women-only concerts, where the response from the audience crossed over into something that unnerved, even hardened industry veterans. His voice was a force of nature, a baritone of such physical presence that it seemed to have weight, to occupy space in a room the way furniture does. When Teddy Pendergrass sang, you did not listen. You were held. On March 18, 1982, at the height of his powers, Pendergrass was involved in a car accident in Philadelphia that left him paralyzed from the chest down. He was 32 years old. The music world went silent with grief. What is less often told, or told quietly, in footnotes, is the role that cocaine played in the years leading up to that night, and in the long decades of health struggles that followed. The accident itself was directly attributed to cocaine. But those close to him spoke openly in later years about the toll the drug had taken on him during the peak of his fame, and about the way those years of use complicated the extraordinary physical and emotional challenge of rebuilding a life after paralysis. Teddy Pendergrass came back. He released music from his wheelchair. He performed again. He refused to disappear. And that refusal, that absolute, furious refusal to be erased, may be the most remarkable thing about a career full of remarkable things. He died on January 13, 2010, from respiratory failure following surgery for colon cancer. He was 59 years old. The colon cancer, his doctors noted, was consistent with complications seen in long-term cocaine users. 59 years old, with a voice like that. 5 left. And if you have made it this far, if you are still here, still listening, you already know this list is not going to get easier. The next name is one that will hit differently depending on your age. But regardless of when you discovered this artist, the loss will feel the same. 5. Rick James.
She says that I'm
Number 5. There are artists on this list who were destroyed by cocaine quietly, the drug working its damage in private, while the public face remained largely intact.
that girl is pretty kinky.
Rick James was not one of those artists. Rick James was consumed by cocaine loudly, visibly, spectacularly, and somehow kept making music through all of it, which is either a testament to his extraordinary talent or evidence of just how deeply the drug had colonized every corner of his life. James Johnson Jr., born in Buffalo, New York in 1948, became Rick James through a process of reinvention that was itself a work of art. The all-Navy enlistee who fled to Canada and formed a band with Neil Young. The Motown artist who spent years trying to convince Berry Gordy that the future of black music was funkier and stranger and more dangerous than Motown was prepared to release. The man who finally broke through in 1981 with Super Freak. A record so rhythmically ruthless that it powered one of the best-selling hip-hop singles of all time when MC Hammer sampled it a decade later. Rick James understood music at a molecular level. His albums, Come Get It, Street Songs, Throwin' Down, were not collections of singles. They were sonic environments, constructed with the obsessive care of someone who heard arrangements in his sleep. He was a multi-instrumentalist, a producer, an arranger. He could have been Quincy Jones if the cocaine had not gotten to him first. And the cocaine got to him early and stayed late. By the late 80s, his personal life had become a tabloid demolition derby. Legal troubles, abuse allegations, arrests, stints in prison. The music, when it came, was increasingly desperate, the genius flickering through the wreckage. He wrote about the drug with an honesty that was almost clinical. He knew what it was doing to him, could articulate it with perfect clarity, and could not stop. On August 6, 2004, Rick James was found dead in his Los Angeles home. He was 56 years old. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as pulmonary and cardiac failure, and found 9 drugs in his system, including cocaine and methamphetamine. 9 substances, 56 years old. A catalog that still sounds like the future. Off the street. 4 entries left, and we are entering the territory where the names get bigger, the losses get heavier, and the question stops being how and starts being why. 4. Whitney Houston. Entry 4. And here is where the temperature of this documentary changes. Because the next 3 names are not just legends. They are monuments. They are among the most significant artists in the entire history of recorded American music. And the fact that we are listing them here, in a countdown of lives cut short by cocaine, should produce in every listener something beyond sadness. It should produce fury. Whitney Houston. Born August 9, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey. Raised in a household where music was not a hobby or an aspiration, but a language. Her mother was Cissy Houston, one of the great gospel voices of the 20th century. Her cousin was Dionne Warwick. Her godmother was Aretha Love. The cocaine began, by most accounts, in the early 90s. The exact timeline is contested and ultimately irrelevant. What matters is what it did. You have on you. The voice began to show damage. Concerts were erratic. The radiance that had seemed permanent started flickering. Those who loved her watched and waited and hoped, and were not always rewarded for their hope. On February 11, 2012, the night before the Grammy Awards, Whitney Houston was found underwater in the bathtub of her suite at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. She was 48 years old. But I know. The coroner determined that accidental drowning was the immediate cause of death, with cocaine use and heart disease as contributing factors. The cocaine, investigators noted, had been used shortly before her death, 48 years old. She had been scheduled to attend Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party that evening. The music she was still planning to make will never exist. The concerts she would have given, the moments she would have created, the voices she would have moved are simply gone. 3 left, and if you need a moment, take it. This list earns it. 3. Marvin Gaye. You knew before between the... Number 3, there are 3 names left on this list. 3 artists who, by any honest accounting, belong in the conversation for greatest of all time. not just in soul, not just in R&B, but in all of recorded music. And the cocaine was central to the end of all three of them. Marvin Gaye. Born Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. on April 2, 1939, in Washington, D.C. The son of a strict, complicated minister. A childhood defined by conflict, by the tension between the sacred music of the church and the secular hunger of a boy who wanted to be Nat King Cole. He would spend his entire life navigating that tension and make some of the most spiritually charged secular music ever recorded in the process. His early Motown work was extraordinary but conventional. The instrument was always there, always unmistakable, but the framework was the Motown machine, and Marvin was one of its most reliable components. Making records, but conducting an ongoing, lifelong conversation with God and with his own complicated soul. Cocaine entered that conversation in the 70s and began to dominate it. Wealth from black artists, and he spent his career trying to build walls against that extraction. He was, in this sense, decades ahead of his time. And cocaine? Here is where this entry requires nuance. Sam Cooke's death in December of 1964, shot at the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles under circumstances that remain disputed and disturbing to this day, was not directly attributed to cocaine in the official record. He was 33 years old. But what the record does show, what the people around him in the final years of his life have attested to, is a man whose use of cocaine and other substances was increasing sharply in the early 1960s, as the pressures of fame, business, and the civil rights era bore down on him simultaneously. A man whose judgment and behavior were being affected by that use in ways that may have contributed, directly or indirectly, to the chain of events that ended with him dead on a motel floor on December 11, 1964. The full truth of what happened that night may never be known. What is known is this. Sam Cooke was 33 years old. He had already changed the course of popular music. He Had a Change Is Gonna Come, perhaps the most important political song of the 20th century, on the verge of release. And he was gone. But I know. One left. The number one entry on this list is the one that, depending on your age and your relationship with soul music, is either the most expected choice or the one you have been dreading since the cold open. Either way, it is the right choice, and we owe it the full weight of what it means. Number 1, Donny Hathaway. Born October 1st, 1945 in Chicago, Illinois, raised by his grandmother, gospel singer Martha Crumwell, in St. Louis, Missouri. He was singing in public by the age of 3. He was performing on television by the age of 7. He had perfect pitch, an ear for arrangement that bordered on the supernatural, and a relationship with music that everyone who encountered him described the same way. It was not something he was. At Howard University in Washington, D.C. in the mid-1960s, he was a classmate and friend of Roberta Flack, herself one of the great voices of the era. He was studying music formally, but the education he was giving himself, in jazz theory and gospel architecture, in the way a chord could hold an emotion, the way a hand holds water, that was the one that would matter. He began recording for Curtom Records, the label founded by Curtis Mayfield. He wrote and arranged for other artists. He produced. He was, by every account of those who worked with him, a musical intelligence without a visible ceiling. Someone who understood not just how to make music, but why music existed, what function it served in the human experience, what it owed the people who listened to it. And then his own recordings arrived. Everything is Everything in 1970. Donny Hathaway Live in 1972, considered by many critics, musicians, and producers to be the greatest live soul album ever recorded. Extensions of a Man in 1973. The duets with Roberta Flack, Where's the Love, The Closer Our Get to You, that redefined what harmony could communicate. There is a recording of a song for you from his live album, 7 minutes and 40 seconds. It begins quietly, the voice conversational, almost intimate. And over the course of those 7 minutes, Donny Hathaway does something to the audience and to anyone who has ever played that record. That requires more than musical skill to explain. He opens something. He reaches through the speakers and finds a place in the listener that is usually kept private and does not embarrass you for it. It is one of the most astonishing things ever committed to tape. And here is what makes Donny Hathaway #1 on this list. He was also living with a serious, debilitating mental illness, most likely schizophrenia, though the clinical record of that era is incomplete.
So love me.
The cocaine use was intertwined with this in the terrible way it always is when addiction and mental illness share the same body, each feeding the other, the substance offering temporary relief from symptoms while accelerating the underlying damage, the illness making the substance impossible to resist. He was hospitalized, he was treated. He recorded intermittently through the 1970s, the gaps between work growing longer, the episodes more severe. Those around him oscillated between hope and terror. On January 13, 1979, Donny Hathaway fell from the 15th floor of the Essex House Hotel in New York City. He was 33 years old. His death was ruled a suicide. Cocaine was found in his system. 33 years old. He was in the middle of recording a second duets album with Roberta Flack. They had already completed several tracks. The Closer the First Get to You, from the sessions just before his death, became a posthumous #1. Think about what he might have given us at 40, at 50, at 60. The albums that exist only in the silence where they should be, the students he might have taught, the other artists he would have shaped, the music that would have come from a mind like that given time. It is one of the most profound losses in the history of American music. And cocaine was in the room.
Tomorrow.